This is courtesy of Makbili, basically a summary chart of all the different acts that can be performed on a sacrifice and then invalidate it, and what the punishment is, if any. So here we have the psul. The psul is a psul in the Kohen. That is a disqualification of the Kohen. He is someone who has worshipped idols. That's what this first line means. Oved avodah zarah. And it says here, chiyuv mitha b'idei shemayim v'chiyuv malkuth. If a person, Kohen had worshipped idols, and then he performed this act of sacrifice in the temple, is he liable to death at the hands of heaven or to lashes? And the answer is no, there's no chiyuv there. And the service is also valid. L'chadchila, this Kohen shouldn't be serving, but after the fact, he's not punished, nor is the service invalidated. And then we have these list of psuls. Once again, there is no punishment for the Kohen over here. This box says the Kohen will not be punished, but the service is invalidated. What is it? What kind of invalidation can the Kohen have? He could be sitting. He could have some sort of interposition between his feet and the ground. By the way, that there's no dirt of the temple. Interestingly enough, what does it say about the sota? Moshe Rabbeinu commanded us that the sota, she drinks the accursed waters. What's in that accursed waters? Basically the ink with which they wrote on the scroll, but also says umin ha'afar asher yebakar mishkan, some of the dirt that's on the floor of the temple of the Mishkan. So in Mosaic times, what would they do? Did the Mishkan have a floor? No, they just set up the tabernacle somewhere outside, and they enclosed an area with the klayim, with the curtains, and that was defined the Azarah. Apparently, that was also the case even in Shiloh. They did not put down a stone floor, a hewn stone floor of the tabernacle. We haven't found any remnant of it. It's never described. It just says the chiddush of Shiloh was that it was the same tent, but the walls were permanent, permanent stone walls. Apparently, this is one of the chidushim of the first temple, was that the first temple, its main Azarah, and later the outer courts were actually paved stone. Okay, that's a chiddush. And that's why it might be a chiddush also that you bow down to God in the temple. You could bow down to God on hewn stone. Remember, you can't bow down on stones outside the temple. That's called Evan Maskit. What exactly that is, we're going to see the Rambam also. He doesn't exactly understand like Rashi. Okay, but it seems that they only really had such an issue once they built the first temple, and they actually had hewn stone floors with next to the place where they're worshiping. Okay. So how did they take the karka that's called Bein Raglo La'aretz? It's between him and the ground. Okay, in the temple, it's paved stone. We even said that it's if the stone comes out of place, it actually invalidates the stone. But what they do before they had stones in the temple courtyard, there was no such thing. It was mamish dirt. It was a dirt floor. Okay, just so that we know the history. Chatzitza bein yado lakli, an interposition between his hand and the sacrificial vessel that he's supposed to be using. He's wearing a glove. Oved bismol, or he's using his left hand, and onain, that means he is recently bereaved, before the relative's funeral even. Okay, don't forget to save some of that for me. Next, these type of psuls have a punishment of lashes for the Kohen who did it, and it also invalidates the service. What is that? He's a Baal Mum or he's an Ariel. Baal Mum is a physical blemish that we saw. Kohen has a broken leg. The Kohen has, a funny belly button, right? All those funny things that we saw. Or he is uncircumcised. Okay. It's okay, by the way, some Jews have a permission to be uncircumcised. Hemophiliacs and people like that could not be circumcised. Usually the case of an Ariel is he's not a hostile Ariel. The next group does have a chiyuv, even of death. That means they're held liable at the hands of heaven, and also it invalidates service. These are the ones who are tamei, Kohen is impure. Teful yom, one who went to the mikveh but hasn't let the night fall yet. Azar, that's a non-Kohen. A shikor, that's a drunk. And it doesn't mean like, a guy who's like walking around stumbling because he just drank 3 beers. It could just be just 1 beer. Okay, 1 cup of wine is enough to do it. Mechusar begadim, a Kohen who's not properly dressed. He's not wearing his entire Kohen outfit. Yater begadim, a person who's wearing too many clothes. A Kohen who's wearing 2 tunics. It's cold day, so say I'll just wear a second linen tunic. Right? Can't do that. Shelo rechutz yadayim v'raglayim, and the Kohen who had not properly washed his hands and feet from the kior. or any other sacrificial vessel with water. Next group, also they have punishments. The Kohen who does this is liable to death at the hands of heaven or to lashes, but the service after the fact is still valid. Who are these? This is the person, Prum Begadim, person wearing ripped clothes. That means the Kohen outfit is ripped. Or Paru Arosh, which means he has long hair. It's not that he's not wearing his Kohen hat, it's that his hair is more than 30 days growth. And the last thing over here, I don't know why he put this as a separate group, because it could fit in this box up here. They still have a punishment, either death at the hands of heaven or lashes, and the service is invalidated. That's a Mechusar Kippurim. A Kohen who's in the group that we're going to see. Mechusar Kippurim is actually one of the, right at the beginning of the halachas, another section, Korbanos. That's the person like the Mitzorah and the Zav, who have to bring a certain set of sacrifices in order to complete their purification. So they haven't brought those sacrifices yet, so they can't do this. And I think that's a good place to stop there. And now we're going to look into the next batch of halachas. So any question? Yeah, please.
How do you have a Nazir Kohen Gadol?
Who says you have a Nazir Kohen Gadol?
Um,
Yeah, no, it's a theoretical thing. Like I could have it, so he took it, and now he's going to have to serve. So they're going to have to eventually get someone else to do it.
right.
You know, he's invalidating himself. Look, you could have a Kohen Gadol, and he says, you know what, I'm going to marry that widow over there. You think that what we see in the Gemara? We saw there's a Kohen gets married to a divorcee. So what does the Beis Din do? They tell him, we're not going to let you continue serving until you take an oath in front of us that you will get divorced right away, right? So the Kohen Gadol, who declares himself a Nazir, so we're going to look at him and say, like, look, you're basically putting yourself in trouble. You know, anybody who takes a solemn vow like that, there's also a way to do hafaras and darim. Okay, you have to go to the Chacham or the Beis Din, whatever it may be, and you explain your regret, and they find the Pesach to it. So I think that hopefully they would they would be made for the neder and say, look, if the Kohen Gadol had been a little bit more learned and realized this sort of requires him to do things that's not Kohen Gadol like. Remember, being a Nazir is the opposite of being a Kohen in many respects. So they would probably hopefully try to get him out of it. But if he takes the vow, sometimes it has to stick. And I guess they would just look for someone else to, take his place. That makes sense? Yeah, but he still has Malam HaKodesh Moredim. The fact that he became a Nazir does not remove his status as a Kohen Gadol and his obligations. And it's a very big problem. Should tell people should think twice before they take these oaths. Hold on 1 second. I have to tell you. Why would a Kohen want to be a Nazir? Yeah, some Kohanim, they don't need it. The only reason a regular person becomes a Nazir is so that he can achieve or experience what it is to have a higher level of Kedusha. So if you're already a Kohen, you don't need it. Or it's like a B'nai Levi trying to make a joke. Remember, it says they say a person becomes a Kollel guy, he's becoming a member of Shevet Levi. If you're already a Levi, why do you need to go to Kollel, right?
Rabbi Grossman?
Yes, please.
You wouldn't possibly see it as correct that having a logic to it that a Kohen perhaps wants to add more Kedusha.
Yeah, but it prevents him from doing what he needs to do,
No, but let's say it's a time of the year where he's not going to be doing it anyway.
Okay, so he could do it, There's nothing bad about him. We were talking about Kohanim who create a conflict, Technically speaking, you're right. He could do it when he doesn't have to be a Kohen. But I don't think the Gemara doesn't take these things lightly. Remember Shimon HaTzadik's story about the one legitimate Nazir he met, right? You have to really know what you're doing and why. And he said, I never really thought that people were doing it for the right reasons. L'shem Shemayim. I don't think anybody should become a Nazir. Even today, I've met a Nazir, by the way. I don't think anybody should become a Nazir without first examining why it is he wants to do such a thing. Yeah, and that's basically what it is. So a Kohen, I just want to experience what it's like. It's a little bit flippant, isn't it?
I think that if a person becomes a Nazir, for a very limited period of time, like a month and a half, and he does it in a way that it's not meant to brag to the world, I'm a Nazir. It's sort of nobody else necessarily even has to know about it. Then perhaps it's a sign that it's okay. Sometimes people feeling the need to brag about everything maybe is a sign that it's not right. if he's trying to try to prove that he's being different. But if that's not the point, it's between him and Hashem, then maybe there's something to it.
That's fine. Just saying, Shimon HaTzadik never met people he felt he had a very high standard. I don't want anybody to try being a Nazir just because they want to see what it's like. You know, people have a hard enough time actually keeping the commandments that they have. Nazirites were common in temple times, when people were keeping the mitzvahs. You know, they were able to keep the Torah. I don't think
there such thing as
what?
I'm sorry. Is there such thing as a Nazirah?
Yeah, sure.
So for women, that's actually easier because many of them, I mean, if she's married, she's covering her hair anyway. Nobody would know.
Okay, but a lot of people could just go a while without getting a haircut. You know, it's not the craziest thing. That's not the most explicit part of being a Nazir. A Nazir doesn't drink wine. A Nazir always has to make sure not to be the one saying Kiddush. He listens to other people's Kiddush, or he uses bread. A Nazir has to avoid funerals. A Nazir is not even allowed to go to the funerals of his close relatives. A regular Kohen, they purposely contaminate him by contact with his relatives. A Kohen can't just say, well, there's other people doing it anyways. I have 7 brothers. I don't need to help with the funeral in any way. They're all doing it. Kamash Balan, we get the Kohen Tameh. But a Nazir is like a Kohen Gadol in that respect. So eventually people are going to catch on that this person is a Nazir if these regular things happen. Catch on, hey, why don't you say Kiddush? Why don't you ever drink Kiddush? Why you never even take a sip of non-alcoholic wine? Grape juice. You never go near the funeral. What's going on here? So eventually it'll come out. It can't hide it. My point is the Nazaritism, not to be confused with Nazarenism. I heard someone say he called the Nazarite the Nazarene. Nazarene is the literal translation of the Notzri, the rabbinic term for a Christian. So this was a common practice when people kept Tuban Torah. Earlier I was saying we have to learn Tuban Torah. First, learn to keep the basic standards that the Torah prescribes for Am Yisrael as a people involved with the temple. Am Yisrael as a people have to be involved with Truma on a regular basis. They give the priestly portion, of course, to the priests, and challah to the priests, and the priests are supposed to eat it. So that requires us to have a basic familiarity and practical experience with Tuman Torah. And then we also have to go to the temple on a regular basis. Everybody has to eat a Korban Pesach once a year. Once we get that down and we understand how to keep the basic laws of Tuman Torah, which sanctify us, I think then we'll have people who are ready to take the next step and take on Nazaritism. Be able to actually take on the next batch of Issurim that involves. But until Am Yisrael is practicing that, then it shouldn't be done. That's why you had Rav Kook's Talmud became the Nazir. Rav Kook himself had a very parish. He was very set aside. He was very ascetic in his lifestyle, and the Nazir himself had that tendency. So he was a unique individual. Have regular people nowadays just adopt that without even having the slightest concept of what it means to be apart and keep oneself tahor on a regular basis. It's just wrong. Lama davar domeh, the rabbis who discuss vegetarianism, they say even if there is this Kabbalistic stream approach that vegetarianism isn't ideal, the Rav has spoken out against this. And once again, the Nazir, the Rav Kook's Talmidim became vegetarians. The Vilna himself didn't eat meat all the time, but then again, he ate on Shabbos. Just a little bit. But the point is, the people say no, entirely vegetarians. So Rav Sharav Shiv Kohen himself, who was the Nazir's son, and himself continued this tradition of vegetarianism, said to demand of Am Yisrael, like there's certain leftists in America say, yes, the right thing is ethically, it's wrong to eat meat. Am Yisrael we should all become vegetarians or even vegans nowadays. They're wrong because we're not ready for that yet. First, we have to get, even if you're correct, that's an ideal, a messianic ideal, which could be in Rav Kook's thought. Okay, it's an interesting idea. We're not ready for that yet because we still haven't even understood what humanity is about. The problem with too many of these vegetarians and vegans that they say is that they care more about animals than they do about people, which means it's more about hostility to other people than it is caring for animals. And by the way, you're talking to someone who's basically a vegetarian, also sympathizer. And because of these types of things that I'm preaching now, I've even caused some family members, vegetarians in my own house. And like I said, I'm sympathetic to it. I've drastically reduced my own intake of animal products in the last years, and also I've also taken upon myself. By the time I get to age 50, I'll definitely have to cut back just for my own health. But I don't think it's right now that people take this because we're just not ready for it. Okay. Ironically, was I saying it just an hour ago? Not even. Oh, Am Yisrael is ready for the Beis Hamikdash. We have to go ahead with this. But vegetarianism, we're not ready for that. Yes, because Am Yisrael was commanded to have a Beis Hamikdash. I know we're ready for it because that's what God wants of us. But the vegetarian thing, as far as I could tell, God still wants us to eat meat. How do I know that? Because He's obligated us at least once a year to eat meat, if not 3 times a year. So until somehow you find a way out of that, and I don't know, you're not going to tell me that God doesn't want you to actually keep those mitzvahs because He did give us those mitzvahs. So that's how I could say it. Am Yisrael is not ready for the vegetarian idea just yet. Just like Am Yisrael is not ready for taking on Nazaritism. That doesn't mean there aren't individuals today for whom this might be actually a good thing. I can imagine there are some people who are exceptional individuals who are already familiar with Tuman Torah and actually ascribe to these high personal standards themselves, and they go to mikveh regularly and they avoid all these things. They're mamish what Chazal called chaverim. Doesn't mean friends. It means those who. Hold on one second. I'm going to readmit someone, but I don't think it's for the common people just yet. And also it causes problems because if they do not allow us to bring sacrifice, then everybody who takes on a minimum in the zeros might be stuck being a Nazir a lot longer. So this fellow I met last year on Nissan, so he became a Nazir. So he's waiting. His basic term is over apparently, but he's gonna have to wait until they allow the temple service to go ahead for him to, do the whole shave his head and offer sacrifice and go back to drinking wine. Okay, the Nazir ended up being a Nazir the rest of his life. I don't know how long he took it upon himself. Anybody know what it was? Either way, the point was that you can't get out of it. So let's see Issurei Mizbeach. We saw the mitzvahs last week. This is an important mitzvah over here. Mitzvah say liot kol korbanot tmiminu muvcharim. What's tmimim? That means flawless, without moon. And muvcharim. What's muvcharim? The choicest. You have to take the nicest thing. Bring this to your governor. Will he accept this tribute? Shneamar tamim yeh l'ratzon. That's be tamim. It means flawless, and it will be desirable. That means God will accept the sacrifice. That's in Vayikra over here. Zo mitzvah say. That's a positive commandment. It has to be a superior animal. Whoever sanctifies an animal that has a blemish, he says he sanctifies it for the sake of sacrifice. Over below taseh has violated a negative commandment. V'lokel hekte show, and he is to be lashed for doing such a thing. They warn him, hey, don't do that. That animal is missing an eye. That animal is, its ear has the whatever part of it's missing. Okay, it has a gigantic gash in its side or something like that. Some moon shouldn't do that. Shnemar kol asher bomum lo takrivu. Anything which has a blemish, do not offer to God. And over here, once again, you have an extra vav that Mechon Mamre added. An extra vav, the word kol. You don't know there's a cholim in the word kol. Okay, so very very strange. What? Yeah, the word kol is always written without a vav. Why is it written without a vav? We said this a few weeks ago. No, it's not a kamas katan. It's a cholam. If it's its own word, it has a cholam. But why does it become a kamas katan? It's the same. It's going to be the same answer. Why is it never written with the vav? Because vav is not part of the shoresh. The shoresh of the word kol is kaf lamed lamed. So whenever you have a word like that, where the shoresh is missing a letter, and in the singular noun form, there's a cholam, it's always written chaser. Okay? So another word, dove, a bear. And the shoresh is daled bet bet. Give another example, oz. The shoresh is ayin zayin zayin. So there's no vav in oz. And also, whenever these forms are connected to something, they reduce to kametz katan or kubutz. Whereas a word like or, whether with an aleph or an ayin, there's a vav there. And the word kol with a kuf, there's a vav there. Why? Because those are the actual letters of the shoresh. And in all forms of those nouns, the cholam stays. It's never reduced to a kametz katan or a kubutz. Okay? Same rule also when the aleph is part of the shoresh. Rosh, zot, node. Those are also singular nouns with a cholam, singular one syllable. The aleph is present, so you pronounce with a cholam. and the cholim is never reduced to a kametz katan or kubutz. Okay, that was the rule. Next, and the tradition tells us that this is a warning to people sanctifying. Why is it important that tradition says? It says lo takrivu. Takrivu means to actually bring it as sacrifice. But in this case, the Rambam says it's just dedicating it, declaring that this animal is for sacrifice. That's enough. Lamakdish balimu. The sages' tradition tell us that this particular verse in Vayikra is prohibiting the mere act of dedication. Okay. Even if he just said, no, you know what? I'm dedicating its value. What does that mean? He's saying this animal will eventually be traded for money, and that money will be used to buy nesachim. And sometimes nesachim includes menachos, right? He should be lashed. It's a disgrace to the sacrificial foods that he even decided to give an animal that had a blemish. Yeah, the temple will be able to use this animal. They could sell it. Someone's going to buy it for, to chef regular. He's going to pay top dollar for it. Still doesn't matter. A person should not dedicate something that is blemished to the temple. Do you have a question about that?
Something happens, and they get another pair from the original pair, and from the second pair.
Because the original pair was already part of the temple.
Right.
So that's that the problem starts once they're already in temple possession. What do you do if a temple? We're going to see. What do you have an animal that was dedicated properly, whether just its value was dedicated or it itself was meant to be a sacrifice and it develops a blemish? So we'll see. There's laws governing that. One of the notes here says, "Mutter lakdisha levedek habayis." Bedek habayis is okay. What is bedek habayis? This general temple fund, temple upkeep fund. So you could dedicate an animal as a mum for that, and the temple will then sell that animal and use that money for whatever the temple needs. Okay, as long as those things itself, whatever the temple, the bedek habayis fund is buying, is not used to buy things meant for sacrifice. Bedek habayis is general, like we said, general temple fund. Okay. Hamith kawain. Lomar shlamim, v'amar olah. Let's say a person is thinking he wants to make this animal into a shlamim. Shlamim is the type of sacrifice that even regular Jews eat from the meat. The majority of the meat is eaten by regular people. And he said this should be an olah. An olah is, ironically, the old translations of this. Look in Sansino. Sansino's publishing before World War II. What they call an olah literally means something that goes up, which is why ArtScroll translates this as an elevation offering, which is confusing because if you're using English translations before ArtScroll, wondering what elevation offering, they're being literal. It's a burnt offering. That's the old translations, because a burnt offering that's entirely burned on the altar, a burnt offering. And sometimes they say, what was the magic word there? Holocaust. Okay, it means something that's entirely burned. Holocaust. That's what they used to use as this. So who called the Holocaust the Holocaust? It used to be they referred to in history as the Holocaust as the final solution. And I think it was Elie Wiesel who first poetically described the final solution as the Holocaust of European Jewry. And that word stuck. Okay? So that's what we know it as. But it used to be Holocaust did not have such a sad connotation. Okay? So that's what an olah is. Either way, he was planning to dedicate this. Yeah. Okay, what I said, he was being poetic. He said he has this whole thing. You read Night, right? You guys didn't read Night? Did you read Night? Okay, good.
It was actually started reading in my public high school.
In your public high school? Yeah, okay. And they didn't require wherever you were? I'd imagine since whenever that it's a Jewish schools and non-Jewish schools, public schools, everybody has to read Night at some point. I don't know. I regret this. I was just telling there's a guy here who works sort of like a social worker. He was describing, says, you don't want to, how do you teach kids about the Holocaust and the Sarbateves? What do you do for first graders, second graders, different methods? Said, I regret reading all those Holocaust books when I first was able to read English. The time I was 7, they had books around the house. Was my father listening? So I really got myself just scared up by everything, reading personal accounts and the Adler book and Irving Eisner's book and everything else under the sun. And there was tons of books in school, so I read too much about it. So maybe you shouldn't. It's not good. Yeah. So what was he saying? You have this burnt offering. He meant to call it a shlamim. He called it a burnt offering, or vice versa. He meant to make this into a burnt offering, but he declared that would be a shlamim. Lo amar klum, so it doesn't matter. He could be honest with himself. He said, I said the wrong word. Ad sheyeh piv v'libo shawim, until his mouth and his heart and his mind are on the same page. He has to utter what he meant to say. And how do they know that he's telling the truth? Because he was telling his kids, we're going to take this offering to Jerusalem because we're going to celebrate. I want to make a korban toda. Toda is a type of shlamim, right? We're going to take this big fat bull and we're going to give the best korban we can, and we're going to celebrate in Jerusalem when we go there. And then he said it's going to be a burnt offering, and everybody heard him. And it's like, no, Dad, just mean burnt offering doesn't mean every type of sacrifice. That's the kind that you entirely burn. You wanted to make this a shlum. He's like, yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, but you said ola. Oh, okay, so it didn't count. Lefichach hamithkaven lomar al baal mum ola v'kdisho shlamim. So there's a way out. If he had a blemished animal here, and he meant to call it one, but he called it the other. Oh, shlamim varmar ola. He called it a shlamim. He meant to make it a shlamim, but he called it an ola. Afal pishes nithkaven li'isur. Even though he was attempting to do something wrong, dedicating a blemished animal, Eino Lokes. He is not lashed for this. Why? Because it's not. He didn't say the right thing. Oh, good. So if you see someone that he's going to dedicate a Baal Mum and he's not going to listen to you to not dedicate it, trick him into saying the wrong word. Okay. So then it won't be. Then you'll be saving him. Next, we're going to get to an interesting machlokas here, the Ravid and the Rambam. What it means. So we're gonna have to put on our Gemara hats in a minute. Misha dimash mutar lakdish bal mum lamizbeach. A person imagined. Okay, what is this thing? Why is it saying dima? Interesting choice of verb there. Hold on a second. Okay, hold on. Let's say this. You should know better. Someone's asking a question that's related to the shear, but not in shear time. Okay, so he thought it's mutter to dedicate this animal to the altar, and he did so, but it turns out it's not. So what is that? What do we normally call this person? I would say sometimes Rambam would say hikdish b'shogeg, hareza kadosh v'eno lokeh. So he sanctified it, but he should not be lashed. Wait a minute, this Baal Mum is dedicated? I thought you can't dedicate it, but the dedication takes effect. So now it belongs to the temple. By the way, he's not to be lashed. So this is a form of shkaga, right? But it's interesting that the Rambam is describing basically a form of shkaga using different words. Okay? He says, shagag v'ikdish ba'amum lamizbeach. That would have been a normal way. But misha dimasha mutar is normally called shkaga. Shagag v'ikdish. So why do you say it this way? Interesting that he said it this way. So the Ravid's going to jump on here. Okay? Do you have Ravids there? It's hard. I'll read you. They have one note here that basically says that the Ravid disagrees with this thing. He says, ve'eno kadosh. Okay? It shouldn't be holy anyways, okay? Let's see what the Ravid says. He says here, ta'abazeh, okay? Rambam's wrong here. He made a mistake. Kimi shedima mutar lakdish balmum lemizbech v'ikdish. Okay, someone who thought that he could dedicate a balmum to the mizbeach, and then he did utter his dedication. Eino kadosh klal shehu ekdesh ta'ut. It shouldn't be sanctified at all because it's a mistake. It was a mistake, just like the previous halacha said. He declared that this animal, even if it has no balm, even if it's not a balmum, he declared what's supposed to be a shlamim an ola, or declared what's supposed to be an ola shlamim, so nothing happens. Like he said, nothing. All bets are off. So too, a person who accidentally, bishgaga, he thought he could dedicate a balmum, and he tried and went ahead with it. He said, this animal, I can see it as a balmum, it's dedicated temple. No, that's a ta'ut, no hektish at all. Where do Rambam get this? Here's what it says in Tumura. Asa shogeg kimezid bitmura. The halacha equates a shogeg like a mizid with regards to tumura. What is tumura? Tumura is lo yachmilenu v'lo yamirotho. He shouldn't switch it. He shouldn't replace it. What is it talking about? There's a person dedicated an animal to the temple for sacrifice. Yeah, it's a perfectly valid animal. And he almost regrets it. It's like the best sheep in the flock he dedicated. He's like, oh man, maybe not this one, I'll switch it. I'll take this other sheep. It's just also perfectly fine sheep, but I really wanted that sheep, not this one. Okay? So we'll say this sheep instead of that one. What has he now done? That's called a t'mura. What does it mean? It means that the sheep that he first dedicated is still the dedicated to the temple, and so is the second one now. He's just doubled the sacrificial thing. It's basically telling people, if people are aware of this, that Tamura doesn't work, they wouldn't do it. But most people have this faulty idea that you could just switch animals all you want. You can't do that. That's called a tamura. And now this animal, this replacement animal, hasn't replaced. You just copied and pasted the kedusha onto this one. There's more halachas. God willing, we'll get to tamura also. But that's the law on tamura. So it says a shogeg's like a mazid with regards to tamura, whatever this line means. V'lo asa shogeg mizid b'kodashim. But the shogeg is not like a mazid with regards to kodshim, ordinary dedications. That's the Mishneh tamura. He's going to elaborate. V'amrina b'gemara. Here's what you say in the Gemara. Heichi dami shogeg kimizid b'tamura. What does it mean? Give me a case. A shogeg is like a mazid with regards to tamura. Normally, halachically speaking, a shogeg should not be like a mazid. What is a mazid? On purpose. He sins wittingly. He knows what he's doing. And a shogeg is a person who doesn't understand what he's doing. He thinks that what he's doing is permissible. That's the general distinction. And there's the major nafkamina usually is what? Punishment. A person who's actually shogeg often is not punished the same way a mazid is punished. And also he has a sacrificial atonement he has to bring. Could you stick this on the charger? Yeah, okay. That's the usual case. Omar Chizkiah. What is the case of shogeg kamezin tamura? Chizkiah says, kasavur mutar lehamir. Okay? Chizkiah says that a tamura case is a person thought, omer mutar, or savur mutar. That's on Shabbos, by the way. What's a person who violates Shabbos? The shogeg? One of two things. You tell him, hey, don't plow your field. That it's a malacha, and today is Shabbos. And he says one of two things in response. Yeah, I know that it's Shabbos, but plowing a field isn't a malacha. Or he says, I know it's a malacha, but today is Thursday. Okay, one of those two. So there's always the savur or omer. Sometimes omer, by the way, doesn't mean say. In the Bible, there's no verb savur. It's omer gam. Okay, it's like start speaking Hebrew. The word omer. Okay, hal hargini ata omer. Do you intend to kill me? That's what they asked Moses. Rashi has a literal interpretation there, and also that's what Goliath and his brothers were planning to do. It says they're omer, but they're intending. Okay, lemor sometimes means a person's intention. He thinks lemor, saying no. That's what he's thinking. Okay, savur mutar lahamir. Okay, a shogeg of tamura is a person thought he could do tamura. It's okay to swap one animal with the other. Dichvate gabe kachim, and the equivalent case in kachim would be kasavur mutar lakdish bali mumim la mizbeach. Okay, so that's what this line. Chizkiah says this line. The Mishneh means shogeg kamezin tamura. Shogeg is not like a mezin kachim. So what's a mezin kachim? He thinks that he's allowed to make a balmum he's allowed to make a malbum, a korban. Okay. Gabe tamura lake. Gabe kachim lo lake. Here's the critical line. With regards to tamura, he is to be lashed, and with regards to kachim, he is not to be lashed. This line is ambiguous. Okay. So what is the ambiguity here? How is this line ambiguous? Is he lashed for the very action, or is he lashed when he actually goes through with the next step? We're going to see. Perush, Gabe Tamura, with regards to Tamura, Kadosh, okay, because he's a shogeg, it says shogeg kamezid. If he does it bemezid, wait, is it Kadosh or not? So it's not, is it? We're going to see. Vagazuz, Vagozez, Vaovid Boloke. So with Tamura, he makes it Kadosh, even b'shogeg. And the lashing is for when what? Because it's holy, he is to be lashed for when he makes use of the animal. Okay? That's what it means he's to be lashed. Not lashed for the actual act of making the animal into for doing this act of tamur. How do you say tamur? Is it for swapping, I'd say. Okay? It's that once he did swap b'shogeg or b'mezid, now using this second animal is forbidden to the extent that he's going to be lashed for using that animal. Okay? Because he was shogeg initially, he has now created another holy animal, and using a holy animal will result in him being punished. That's how the Ravid reads this Gemara. Okay? Aval gabi kachim lo lucky, if he unwittingly sanctified an animal and made it kachim, and then used the animal, he should not be lashed. Why? Sheno kadosh mipneshu hekdesh ta'ut. The animal has no kedusha because it's hekdesh ta'ut. What did the Rambam say? Rambam understood this differently. He's going to explain what the Rambam understood this. V'zeh mechaber, he's referring to Rambam. Shadima gabi kachim lulaki avad kadosh havi. The Rambam was thinking, with regards to kachim, he should not be lashed for this act of sanctifying something that is wrong, but the animal itself is still holy. V'gabi tmur milke nami lucky al shehemir. And the Rambam therefore means that this wine gabi tmur lucky means he is to be lashed for the very act of committing tmura, of swapping the animal. And the Ravid says the Rambam can't do that. The very act of swapping the animal, the shogeg, is ta'us gedola ta'a, a very big mistake. Why? Shalom matzinu lokal shogeg. The very act of accidentally swapping the animal, b'shogeg, doing a tmur b'shogeg, is the textbook definition of a shkaga, and no one should ever be lashed for such a thing. Which means that when the Gemara says a person should be lashed for such a thing, it means he is lashed if after he did this thing, the act of doing this is not deserving of a punishment. So that now the thing is sanctified, and then using it is an act that would result in him getting lashed. Okay? V'amar mutter shogeg karile. Because why a omer mutter or a savar mutter, dima mutter, all these, there's all synonyms, is a shogeg. That is the definition of shogeg. And a person who doesn't act b'shogeg is never punished. So how do you have a case of a person, once again, how do you have a case of a person, according to the Ravid, of being lashed for Tamura b'shogeg? The actual act of him swapping the animal shogeg, of course he can't get hurt because that's an actual shkaga. But now that he knows that this animal, his friends told him, hey buddy, you just did something you're not allowed to do according to halacha. You've just sanctified another animal. So this animal is now sanctified. Now if he were to do something with the animal and treat it like his own normal animal, he is to be lashed for doing that. By the way, the assumption was using an animal that has been dedicated to the temple service results in a punishment. If you dedicated your own animal to the temple, whether it's a bedek, a bias, whatever it is, or it's you declared that this is to be for sacrifice, so now you can't use this animal for work. I don't know, what are sheep good for any work? No. If it's an ox, you use it to plow, and if it's a sheep, you shear its wool and use its wool. That would be the act. But the Rambam seems to say that the Rambam read this more basically and said for some reason the very act of doing this shkaga, swapping the animal, is an act that results in lashes. Okay, so you see why it is. It's very interesting. The Ravid's a genius here, So which way do we understand the Gemara? Chalk this up. Another question: who do we hold like Ravid or Rambam in this regard? Okay. What did the Sanhedrin mean? What did Chazal mean in this case? Because, like I said, it is ambiguous. You understand the Rambam's reasoning, but the Rambam's it's Bam Kasha the Ravid. I haven't seen a defense of the Rambam necessarily that I understand enough. There's obviously we could see how the Ravid himself said that's how the Rambam read it. He says that's a mistake. The Rambam saying no, that's how I read it. That's a legitimate reading. That's the Chiddush, that this is perhaps the one act of violation b'shogeg which does result in a punishment. Actual lashes. Normally, by the way, what's the punishment for a person who's shogeg? Like I said, we don't lash him. Person who violates Shabbos, the way we described before, he plows on Shabbos because he thought it was mutter to plow on Shabbos, or he thought it wasn't Shabbos. So what does he have to do now? What? He has to bring a chatos. Yes. So that's a good question. So let's get back into the Rambam. What did the Rambam say? Once again, Misha Dima Shemuter Laktish Bal Mizbeach Viktish Hareze Kadosh Ve'eno Loke. Okay. The person who is thought that it's okay to be makdish a balmun to this beach is he's sanctified the animal, but he is not to be lashed. And the Rambam's implication is that, but if he did a tamura of a hektish animal, it is holy and he is to be lashed. And the Rav would say no, he is not lashed. Okay, so like I said, the Rambam, the Ravid's basically his rule is hektish kazeh nechshav hektish toos ve'eno kadosh. Here it says if the Ravid will also say that if he hikdish, it's not kadosh. Why? Because it's a straight out mistake. He reads the Gemara totally differently, and we should review this a few times over. So it's going to be on the final exam, obviously. Machlokas, Ravid, and Rambam here. A person who slaughters a balmum as a korban is also to be lashed. Before we had the pasuk seems to say lach rivo, and we said that's dedicating a balmum, and now the person's gone even farther. He's actually managed to bring it to the temple, and he's even slaughtered it. The Kohanim didn't get a chance to say, "Hey, buddy, what are you doing with this? Let us look over your korban for a minute." Why? Because a regular Jew has the right, if I could use that word, it's his choice to slaughter his own sacrifice if he knows how to slaughter properly. So he whips out a knife and he says, Kohen, come over here, catch the blood, because you have to continue the service starting with catching the blood. I'll do the slaughtering. And just then they realize, hey, you weren't supposed to, this animal has a moon, but he already slaughtered it. Lokesh, Harina Ne'amar B'Vali Mum, Lo Takrivu Eile La. Another pasuk, which is, by the way, just 2 psukim after the previous one, says Lo Takrivu. Kol Asher Boom, Bomum, Lo Takrivu. And it says Lo Takrivu Eile La Hashem. Don't bring these as sacrifice to God. So this Takrivu is referring to the actual act of sacrifice, means the slaughtering. According to tradition, this verb, which is the same as the other one, 2 psukim earlier, is a warning. Thou shalt not to the person who is slaughtering the animal. And then the Kohen who throws the blood of the blemished animal on Mizbeach is to be lashed if he did it intentionally. Right? The general rule is the Kohen didn't realize it was a balmum. No one told him, and he threw the blood. I guess they passed it, right? On Hanukkah, on Pesach. The Kohen who catches the blood is not the same Kohen who's going to be throwing the blood. You can pass it to many hands, right? As long as they do some motion to get it there. So the Kohen who actually applied the blood to the altar is also to be lashed. Lo takrivu la Hashem. Another 2 psukim later, it says once again, don't bring it. Same verb, takrivu. And in this case, it means don't put the blood on the altar. So with the tradition tells us that this is a thou shalt not for the zorek. I'm going to ask you why throughout the parsha in Emor that say lo takrivu, lo takrivu, lo takrivu. One means don't dedicate, one means don't slaughter, and one means don't apply the blood to the altar. Okay, and then you could say like, wait, there's another stage in sacrificial service. What is it? Yeah, burning the rest of the animal on the altar. Whoever burns. Okay, laktir means to cause it to smoke, cause the fat to smoke. That's how they literally used to translate it, because the Torah makes smoke. So he's the one who puts the avarim, the emurei. Sorry, in this case, let's say it's a shlamim. So the avarim aren't going on there, but the entrails are. Okay, so he's going to burn the entrails of this balmum on the altar. Lokeh. Also, this has to be a kohen doing this because regular people can't do this. Shneimar, we isheh. They spelled isheh with a yud. Very surprising. That means a fire offering. Lo titanu. He spelled the titanu with a yud. Ay. Lo titanu mehem alam mizbeach. Don't put them as a fire offering on the altar. So this one's purely clear. Like it means, and don't do the final step. Yeah. No, there's no yud in mizbeach. Thank God. Elu achalavim. This is referring to the fats. The fats are the most basic part of any sacrifice gets burned on the altar. So that's usually internal fats. The one they say, tarat al kaved, and the rest of them, the same kind that you're not allowed to eat. If you have chulin, the kind they just throw away. So these are the fats that they offer on the altar. If a person dedicated a balmum to the temple or for sacrifice, ushchato, and he slaughtered it, and he threw its blood onto the altar, it means apply the blood to the altar. Viktiri murav, and he burned its entrails on the mizbeach. Lokeh arba malkiyot. He is to be lashed 4 times, 4 different sins. Okay. Yesh lav miuchad al akravat bal mum over. Okay. According to the Rambam, there's a special prohibition also on bringing an animal that has transient blemish that's going to go away. Das Ramban. According to the Ramban, Isser akrovas balmum over kalul be Isser akrovas balmum kavua. Okay, Ramban says is 1 Isser. Balmum over, balmum kavua, whether permanent blemish or transient blemish, same thing. Okay, so machlokas Rambam and Nachmanides and Maimonides. Well, no. Yeah. So is it one Isser or is it 2 Issurim? Yeah. Okay. So they're going to lash a person 4 times. Lamaisa, is a person going to be lashed 4 times? Even a full set of lashes, the Beis Din decides, to reduce that. Okay. The whole point of lashes is not that we're actually going to whack a person 156 times. The point is that a person should realize the severity of what he has done. Okay. Echad bal mum kavua or bal mum over. It doesn't matter if it's bal mum kavua or bal mum over. Im hikrivo over bechol elu. Okay, the Rambam saying very clearly here. Bal mum over, bal mum kavua. It doesn't mean if it's transient blemish or a permanent one. He has violated all four of these thou shalt nots, as it says. Lo tizbach l'Hashem okecha shor v'aseh asher yabumum. Do not tizbach. That's interesting. Takrivu. What's between the tizbach and takrivu? Nafkamina here is not really anything. Lakriv and lizbach, if you're talking about animals, the same thing. But tizbach is an act, means the act of slaughter. Zvachim, as opposed to benachos. What's the point of zvachim? It means the sacrifices that are slaughtered, as opposed to sacrifices that are not slaughtered. So what animals are not, what sacrifice is not slaughtered? Anything that's vegetable or mineral. Water and salt are not zvachim. Even, let's say, technically speaking, bird sacrifice. They don't use a knife on that. That's malika. That's malukim, nimlakim, right? So that's what it means. Shorba says shir bomu. And this is important because there's actually very little standards of what's a balmum for bird sacrifice we're going to see. That's why specifically it doesn't say, it says lo tizbach, because if it meant even birds here, which are not included, shorba se includes the three types of animals that are mammals that they offer on the temple. Shor was referring to bovine, cows and bulls, and set includes sheep and goats. That basically covers all the animals that are offered as sacrifice that aren't birds. Okay, so lo tizbach, that's an important one. Tizbach refers to the actual act of slaughter. This boach sometimes just means, by the way, just slaughtering. It's another word for slaughtering. Okay, usually more ritual than lishchot. Okay, mipia shmuel lamdu shizo azhara leval mumover. So the tradition tells us that this is talking about an animal with a transient blemish. Kigon she'aba ba'beima garav lach o chazazit. If it has one of these lesions on its skin that's either pussy or not, okay, some are dry, some are not. If he offered a sacrifice, loke, he is to be lashed. Give me 1 second, I'll take a drink. So, like I said, the Rambam disagrees. We're going to see there's a pasuk here. Did I get to the pasuk with the Mosh Chasam? Do we see that yet already? Where's that pasuk? Hold on a second. I made a note here. We have to mention that word. Why I saw this word here? Why did I make the note over here? Okay, but we'll mention anyways. There's a very interesting word here that occurs a few times in the Torah, and they look very similar, and they have completely different meanings. Mush chatham mahem mumbam, ki mush chatham mahem mumbam, and it's a kamatz katan, and under the mem, and under the het there's a regular kamatz. Mush chatham means their corruption. So what is the shorish of that word mush chatham? It's shin chet taf. Okay, shachas, lashchit. Okay, vatishachit haaretz. There's a corruption here. Mushchatham bahem mumbam. There's a corruption within them. They have a mum, so you shouldn't offer them as sacrifice. That's what it means in Vayikra. And then it says l'moshcha vahem u'maleya vames et yadam. It's talking about the Kohanim. L'moshcha vahem. A moshcha is apparently the same word here. It looks like it. Moshchatham is their moshcha. Ha-moshcha shelahem. Moshchatham vahem moshchatham vahem l'moshcha vahem u'mei vamet yadam. L'moshcha, but in this case, moshcha is not a noun. Moshchatham is their corruption. That's a noun. It's a possessed noun. L'moshcha is like the form of li'ochla. Really, it should be le'echol, something to be eaten, but it's a more poetic form. Okay, la'avos Hashem instead of le'ahovas Hashem. Okay, l'moshcha is a poetic form of the infinitive verb what? Limshoach. Limshoach means to anoint. L'moshcha vahem u'amelei vameth yadam means as they're part of their anointment process and to initiate them into the service. L'malei yadam means to bring them into the service. Talking about the Kohanim. In this case, the word moshcha in Shmos, the shorish is mem shin chet, limshoach, to anoint. So that ends up being the same thing. It's like moshcha and moshcha. Well, in one case, the mem is just a prefix, and the shorish is corruption, and the toughest part of the shorish, moshchatham, and in l'moshcha vahem, there's no tough at the shoresh. The shoresh is entirely mem shin chet, and the extra kamatz at the end, the silent kamatz hey, the moshcha, is a poetic form. Like I said, like ochla and other similar times. Okay, so just make a note of that. They're almost related. This is similar to the machlokes in Nikud in Esav's wife's name. Is it Mahalath or Mahalath? Yeah. Some Humashim have it with a kamatz and some have it with a patach. You seen that? Mahalath or Mahalath? What's the nafkamina? One, well, we have to see what are the source codexes say, because it makes a big difference, right? Is it Yahalom or Yahalom? The similar thing exists, and Kanakim or Kanakim, patach or kamatz. The precious stone in the breastplate. So it's some have it is Yahalom in kamatz, and some have it with Yahalom with the patach. Okay, you're used to a patach. Does it make a difference? No, because of proper noun. Okay, it doesn't change it. All these cases, it doesn't change it. Mahalath or Mahalath. But what's the nafkamina? If her name is Mahalath with a kamatz, it means the mem is part of the shoresh. Her shoresh is from the word mechila. And there are some drushans like that. It's like Esav, even Esav gets married, it's like a Yom Kippur day, all his sins are forgiven. So Esav got married, so his new wife is Mahalath because God forgave him for some of his sins. So that's the name of the kamatz. The shoresh is just mem chet lamed with the feminine suffix. If her name is Mahalath, then that's from the word mahala. Mahala is a disease, and the word mahala, the mem is a prefix because the shoresh is chet lamed hey, silent hey, from sickness, holy. Okay, so if you read her name like Mahalath with a patach, it means that she was just as bad as his other wives. Just brought another sickness into his house. So you can see that actually there's many interpretations about what's her name alluding to, and it's once again the pronunciation of her name alludes to these what do you call it the diverging opinions. Okay, the mahala, the mem in the word mahala, which is a prefix, is similar to the mem in the word mikdash and maaseh, except normally it should be with the chirik, but when the first letter of the shoresh is a guttural letter, so it gets a patach and chatach patach. Maaseh, mahala. Give me another example. Something with an ayin. Ma'akeh, right? Okay, good. That's a good example. Ma'amar with an aleph. Okay, with another letter, mishmar was with the shin, so you just get a chirik there. Mikdash and mishmar and mif'al, you just put a chirik and a shavanach under the next letter. Okay, good. So now we're yotzei today's grammar lesson. Here's an interesting halakha over here, because the Rambam doesn't bring up the rest of the halachas that Chazal say. There's certain halachas that apply to goyim. It says here, "V'lo korbanot Yisrael bevad, ela af korbanot hagoyim." The Gentiles sacrifices. Gentiles could also bring sacrifice to God. Im hikrivan vehin ba'alei mumin lokeh. So the Jew who brings the sacrifice on behalf of the Gentiles aren't lashed for anything. There's no such thing as a Gentile who violates an Issurei of the Torah that he's lashed. If it's one of his own personal Issurim, one of the Sheva mitzvos, what's always the punishment for violating them? Death. Okay? And if it's something that he's not liable for, like bringing a balmum, a Gentile is not to be punished for bringing a balmum to God because it's not one of the Sheva mitzvahs, and it's not a thou shalt not. Just like a Gentile who eats pork is not to be punished. It's heter for him. Not that it's heter for him to bring sacrifice to God this way, but he's not governed by these rules. So the Jew who did it for him is to be lashed also. Says, and from the hand of a foreign person, don't bring God's bread, so to speak. It means God's food. That's what it says. Lechem elokecha, korbani lachmi. God's lechem is the sacrifice on the altar from all these blemished animals. So they're saying here, this is from Zvachim and Kuf Tet Zayin. Made a note there. Gentiles have lower standards of what is a balmum. We're going to see later. The Rambam doesn't go into all these things. Basically, the halacha there, because I'll say, whereas we saw already some mumim that apply to animals and people, and there's going to be a whole list and pictures over here of other blemishes that apply to animals. For Gentiles, it just means not missing an avar. Okay, it shouldn't be missing a toe or an ear or something like that. Okay, something with even an ear might not be an avar. Rambam defines it as a limb that has flesh and bone. Okay, so not every single thing that we even call avar or an aver is an avar halachically speaking with regards to the laws of mumim and also tumas mace. God willing, we'll see all those in their place. So this comes from either way. Also, the whole idea of what's considered a balmum for Bnei Noach actually learned from Noach himself. There's midrashic ideas there. Hamatil mum bakodashim. Let's say a person inflicts a blemish on a holy animal. Okay, for whatever reason, I don't know. It's probably maybe he's upset that someone took his animal. Like he regrets having dedicated an animal. Instead of doing tamura, he thinks that if he blemishes the sheep, so he could get it back. He's unfit for sacrifice, and he'll get his sheep back or recoup his loss, which he brought upon himself, by the way. Let's say kagon shesime eno o kitei yodo. He blinds one of the eyes of this sheep, or he cuts off its arm. Okay, does something terrible to it. He is to be lashed. Sharei ne'emar b'korban komum lo yebo. It should not have any blemish within it. Okay, well, that sounds sort of passive. It should not have a blemish. Mipiash mu'alamdu. Also, from tradition, the sages taught us, shezo azhara shelo yitain bo mum. Okay, it's a prohibition against a person applying a blemish to his animals. Okay, I'm gonna make sure I'm on the right page over here. Fine. Ve'eno lokeh el bizman shebeit hamikdash kayam. And good. See, notice the Rambam has to say this. Why? He's only to be lashed when the temple is actually standing. Why? Because you could still bring sacrifice when the temple is not standing. Yes, you could even in a state like today, the commandments to bring sacrifice apply. And an individual can also bring sacrifice. It's just he is not to be lashed if he applies a mum today. Why? Sharei haya ra'ui korban ufsalo. It was fit for a korban, and he invalidated it. Ela aval bizman hazeh. But today, if there's no mikdash, he has certainly violated a prohibition. He should have brought this animal as sacrifice. He just invalidated it. He is not to be lashed.
What does it mean that is it just enough to have the Mizbeach?
No, base of mikdash. Yeah.
Even though it could have been brought for
yeah.
Yeah,
there's also we saw machatzitza shekel applies. So we need to bring the korban tamid, but we don't have machatzitza shekel today. Because machatzitza shekel, the mitzvah to collect it, only applies when the temple is standing. So where do you get the money for the public sacrifices? So the Rambam has a mechanism, bedek habayis, and there's other ways to take it from private donations, etc. There is a way to do it, but really, our obligation to give machatzitza shekel will only come into force once they actually build the temple. But doesn't mean we're still off the hook with the korban tamid. You have to find some other way to do it. Yeah, there's a few nafkaminos. Even though the Rambam said it very clearly, we still are supposed to bring sacrifice today. Hitil mum bakodashim, uva acher vitil ba mum acher, hashinino loket. Person applied a blemish to this animal, and someone else came and gave it another blemish. So the second one has done nothing. He's already blemished. It's already a blemished animal. He is not to be lashed. It doesn't mean there's a heter to do that. It just means he's not to be punished. Okay. It doesn't matter if this person applied a blemish to actual sacrificial animals or to their switches. Like I mentioned before, the tamura. This is the original sheep that had been dedicated to sacrifice, and that's the sheep that he thought he could put in its place. And it turns out he just copied and pasted that tamura, so that holiness to it. So that animal over there also, he cannot make a blemish in it, except for a bechor and a meiser. If a person does tamura to a bechor, what's a bechor? That's a firstborn animal. Firstborn animal is sacrificial, not entirely sacrificial, but to a certain extent. And a meiser, that's the 10th animal. Okay, the person is supposed to gather up all the animals that have been born that year, whatever, that season, and put them in the pen, and then let them out one by one. And every 10th animal is marked with red, and that is also becomes a sacrificial animal. So their tamura has a different halacha. What is it? Shematil mum b'tamuratan eno lokeh. If a person made a tamura of a bechor or of a meiser, then someone else comes and puts a blemish in this tamura of the bechor or the meiser. That person is not to be lashed. Lefisha einan ruin korban, because the tamura of a bechor and meiser do not become an actual korban. Okay, the tamura of a bechor and meiser isn't the same thing as a bechor and meiser. As we will see later, God willing. What's a cheat ta'ut asiri? It was the ninth animal that came out of the pen. He marked it as a tenth, as a miser. Okay, so also, this animal is not completely sanctified. So a person who blemishes it on purpose is not to be punished with lashes. How do you do that? You miscounted. Okay, could happen. Has anybody ever done this before? Anybody count the miser of their flock? I told you about that guy. Yeah, whatever. There's someone who just made up nonsense. The There's a guy who might do it. There's a guy who is I believe he's the closest thing we have to a Navi Sheker today. And the fact that he calls himself rabbi and he basically preaches sins. Okay? Like touchy-feely Judaism says, I'm Orthodox, but I'm totally pro, you name the Avera. They're like the worst Averas in the book. And many people have criticized him for this already. So he's an outspoken vegan. Also says everybody should be a vegan, like his high personal standards, Homosexuality is fine, and veganism, that's a chiyuv. Okay, very strange. So this fellow wrote that, the Mishneh says that there's what's the first of Elul? It's Rosh Hashanah for what? Meiser Behemoth. Okay, Meiser Behemoth, that's the cutoff date for the animals born this year. That's the Mishnah Rosh Hashanah. By the way, what does it say in Bechoros? That's actually just Rabbi Meir's opinion. The majority opinion says the Rosh Hashanah for Meiser Behemoth is Aleph Tishrei, just like Rosh Hashanah of the rest of everything. Okay, but it's mentioned because there's 4 Rosh Hashanahs. That's how the Mishnah starts in Rosh Hashanah. So what does it mean? That's the cutoff date for certain animals. All the animals born before this day are to be tithed as one group, and the animals born after this day are to be tithed as a different group. What does tithing mean? That the marked animals are to be slaughtered in the temple and eaten as sacrificial food. So this vegan fellow, because of course doesn't want people eating any animals and all that, or offering sacrifice, he also wrote a thing, I hope the Beis HaMikdash is not rebuilt, and pray to God that not happen, which just goes to show you how dedicated he is to the Torah. And he just called it, it's the Rosh Hashanah, and he left out the word Meiser Behemoth. It's Rosh Hashanah Liv Hemot, or Lib Behemot. Also, he doesn't know Hebrew grammar, so Lib Behemot. It says Liv Hemot, but he wrote Lib Behemot. It's the New Year for animals. Just like the people, he started this whole thing. He wrote a whole thing. It's the New Year for animals. Just like humans have a New Year where they celebrate. I don't know. What does God say about New Year's? Sada Tokef. New Year means you're going like out through the pen. The animals are going in front of God like animals going through the pen, right? Sheep to the slaughter almost, right? Who's going to die, who's not? God's judging everybody, and it's all in his hands. But no, and we should recognize that it's a holiday for animals also, and remind you that you should be kind to animals. Like so it's like the guy Zar Karev Yumuth. He was wrong on 3 accounts. He didn't interpret Zar right, didn't interpret Karev right, didn't interpret Yumuth right. So yes, it is Rosh Hashanah for animals, except he got it wrong that the halacha is it's not the first of Elul, it's the first of Tishrei according to halacha, and it's not Liv Hemot, it's for Meiser Behemoth. It's not that we should be nice to animals and animals are people too type of touchy-feely nonsense. It's that it's the Rosh Hashanah that we decide which animals are to be killed and eaten. Okay, so other than that, he's 100% right, but that's usually what they do. So God save us from such people. Okay, what? I could show you the source. It's just the Ziyuf HaTorah. A makdish ba'alas mum la Mizbeach. The animal has a mum. It has been dedicated to the temple. Person to this afal pish lokeh harezo nidkadsha. So this person is belashed. This animal does have a form of sanctity. Cannot become a korban. So what do you do with it? V'tipadeh be'erech hakohen. So it is to be redeemed for cash based on the valuation of the Kohen. The Kohen decides this animal is worth, 100 shekels for slaughter. So the fellow is to pay 100 shekels to the temple to redeem it. And when he pays the gizbar, that's the Kohen, the treasurer of the temple, for this animal, he gives its money. And now it becomes a chulin again. Chulin means, it's the opposite of kachim. Chulin, there shouldn't be a vav in chulin because the word is halal, meaning secular. Okay. By the way, the word chol, also in Hebrew, is one of those words should not have a vav. Okay. The word chol meaning secular does not have a vav in it properly. That's why if you look in your siddur, mavdim ben kodesh the chol doesn't have a vav. And that's also why chol moed, Rambam says possessive is chulo shel moed with a kubutz and the dot and the lamed. Okay. The avi b'dameha korban, and you then use that money. Okay, the temple people then use that money that he paid to redeem this animal. That becomes sacrificial funds. V'chein hadin, And so too, it makes sense. Didn't mean logical halacha. B'veimat kodeshim shenafal b'mum. Animal properly sanctified that somehow developed a blemish. This was a perfectly valid sheep that meant to be a korban, and somewhere along the way, it develops a mum, a disease. God gave it the mum. No one did anything to it, so it is also to be redeemed, as the owner pays money to get the animal back, and that money goes to purchase proper sacrifice. It is a positive commandment to redeem these animals that have developed blemishes. And they should go out to chulin, means they should be desanctified, and they should be consumed like regular, like ordinary meat. Chulin. They say halal also. When the Arabs eat halal, it's the equivalent of chulin, non-sacrificial meat. That's what it means. It doesn't mean kosher. Shnemar rak b'chol waf nafshecha tizbach v'achalta basar. Says only according to the desire of your heart or of your soul. It means your appetite. Should you slaughter and eat meat? Now, this seems to be in context telling you that it's permissible to eat meat when you want to eat meat, right? That's what it seems to be. Once again, rabbinic tradition, they learned, what does this mean? Shakatuv midaber b'fsulei muktashim sheipadu. It's telling us that no, psulei muktashim, sacrificial animals that became invalidated, should be redeemed, traded for money, and then they may be consumed. That's what the better way to deal with them. Which we didn't learn together. Arachin is named Masech. That's also one of the sections of the halacha that Rambam discusses. If you have an animal that is unclean, that should not be offered as sacrifice to God. What is that talking about? Also there, it talks about animals. Normally, be'emat tme'ah means an animal of non-kosher species. No, it's talking about a kosher species of animal. It's talking about a cow or a sheep, but it has a mum in this case. Why shouldn't it be brought as sacrifice to God as a mum? So it should be redeemed. By the way, it doesn't have to be the owner, I think, who has to do the redeeming. It could be anybody else who wants to also. Someone could step in and say, I'll pay the animal's redemption money, and then it's his animal to choose what to do with it. Good halacha. We've been mentioning this before. Now the Rambam's going to give us the nafkamina here. Ma bein ba'al mum kavua leval mum over. What's the difference between an animal with a permanent blemish and a transient blemish? What's the difference? Halachically, shemakdish ba'alat mum kavua, a person who sanctifies an animal that has a permanent blemish, im yalada v'hi kodesh, if it gave birth and it's kodesh now, yipodeh havlat. So the offspring should also be renewed. By the way, you guys, this is good. Take a picture of this. Makbili has a chart there also, right? Because we're going to see all these very confusing halachas now. It's good that we're going to see it in chart form after we read this. Okay? So this animal has a bal mum kavua. It gives birth. So it also, the vlad, that's the offspring, also has a certain form of kedusha, so it'll also be redeemed. Wait a minute. What if the vlad itself doesn't have a blemish? The vlad is perfectly fine. It's its mother is blemished. The mother is blemished. But the blood should also be redeemed. That's what it's teaching us. Okay? It should go out and be also secular food. Why? Even though he himself, this offspring could have been a sacrifice, it doesn't itself have a blemish. Its mother was blemished. So that the main thing, so that the secondary part of the animal, that's the animal's offspring, shouldn't be better than the main animal. As if the main animal itself was disqualified. A balas mum, an animal that is blemished, gives birth to a perfectly unblemished animal. It wouldn't be right to take the offspring and make it into a korban. Okay, it's not right. So it also should go out. Very interesting. That's a bal mum. That's a bal mum kavua. Vimnis abra kodem shetipodeh. Let's say this animal became pregnant before it would be redeemed. V'yolda archar pidyon, and that gave birth after its redemption. Okay, means like they talk about the ger. Okay, the animal conceived while it was still holy, and it gave birth after it had been redeemed already. Someone gave this, so this mother animal is now balas mum kavua, had been kachim, now it's not. Now it gives birth. Havlad kulin. So the Vlad, that's the offspring, is also cool and doesn't need to be redeemed itself. Why? The redemption that was performed on the mother covers the offspring. He's in utero. Okay, he's also redeemed. V'meta kodem shetipadeh. If this animal dies before it is redeemed, the mother, okay, it's pregnant, it dies before it's redeemed. Nifdeit achar shetamut, so it should be redeemed after it's dead. Why? The corpse still has value. What kind of value? Well, they'll use the skin to make leather, and the meat can go. Maybe I don't know. A Gentile would want maybe buy it, or use it to feed the dogs. Okay. The assumption was all the non-kosher meat that you have around, you feed to your dogs. Oh, you're allowed to have dogs? Yes, we saw that in Halacha a few times. David HaMelech had dogs. Okay. If you live in certain people need dogs. If you're a shepherd, you need dogs. So what do you feed your dogs? Every now and then, you have a sheep that you can't make good use for, so that's the one the dogs get to eat. Right? It's not complete kedusha on its body. It's not complete sanctity. It's only on its value. The animal's value is completely holy. Because it had a permanent blemish. Okay? The body's not completely holy, but its value is completely holy. On the other hand, you have a Baal Mum Over, Baalaf Mum Over, Makdish Baalaf Mum Over, an animal that had been dedicated. It has a transient blemish. Otmima, or it was a perfectly unblemished animal. And then it develops a mum after he dedicated it. If this animal dies before it's redeemed, it should be buried. Why? It's a kachim tbimim. Oh, it developed the mum, so what? That wasn't your fault. It has to be buried. You can't get any use out of it. Kachim that die, general rule, kachim that die are to be buried. You can't say, well, it's dead already, so they never got offered a sacrifice. It belongs technically to the temple. Really, what you should have done to this animal while it was living was hamadah, means bring it in front of the kohen for evaluation, and next stage is v'ha'aracha, evaluation or valuation without an e. Okay, hamadah means the act of bringing it officially to the kohen to be inspected. Kamosha biyarnu b'arachim, just like as we explained earlier in arachim. Now let's say v'im nishchata kodem shtipadeh, the baalas mum over. Okay, it has a transient mum. It's been slaughtered before it was redeemed. Why do you have to redeem it? It developed a blemish. But then they slaughtered it too early. Ha'rezo nifdei kol zman shimifar keset. He could still perform the act of redemption, paying the kohanim money, as long as it's still twitching. That's a nafkamina. What's the nafkamina between Avram and Achai for a Jew and Gentile? You guys seen the nafkamina? A Gentile has to kill his food before he eats it. It has to be dead. A Jew just has to slaughter the animal before he eats it. Nafkamina is if a Jew slaughters the animal and it's still twitching. So for the Jew, it's not Avram and Achai. The Jew slaughtered the animal. But for the Goy, it's not kosher yet until the animal stops completely. Okay, so there's another nafkamina. As long as he slaughtered the animal, it's technically dead. He can even eat it. It's like kosher slaughter. As long as it's still twitching, he can pay the kohanim to redeem this animal like he was supposed to, and then it's redeemed. Then it can be eaten. Vim yalada, and if it gave birth, this animal, yikravulada. This is a balas mumover. So it gives birth. Its offspring is just a sacrifice also. We saw its counterpart that has a permanent moon. The offspring is not. Okay, it's the Vlad Hulin. Okay, the Yolda Achar Pidyon, that is. Okay. Nithabra Kodem Shetipodeh. Let's say it gets impregnated before it's been redeemed. Yolda Achar Shenifdate, and then it gave birth after it was redeemed. It was redeemed, right? Doesn't the redemption cover its Vlad? Havlad Aser Veno Difte. Nope. The Vlad doesn't get covered by the Pidyon. The Pidyon of the Balas Mumover that became pregnant once it was a sacrifice, but before it was redeemed, does not cover its Vlad, and the Vlad cannot be redeemed. The Vlad has a Kedusha to it. Very interesting. Okay. Why do they do this? Like I said, it's a good thing we have a chart to follow all this. You have a chart there, so do this. So what does he do with this? What? Oh, good. Okay. So we'll put it on the screen soon. So what should he do about this? Ela Ketzad Yasa. What does he do? Samach Lefidyonimo, before redeeming the animal, that's Samach right beforehand. Matpis Zehavlad L'Shemo Toazeva. He declares that this offspring should be the same type of sacrifice that his mother was supposed to be. Matpis is like the fus became the word. Where they come with the fus, matpitas say whatever this has, whatever holiness or dedication or status this one has, that one has also. Lot piece of Nazir means whatever this guy, you're talking about Nazir, whatever he's got, I got too. So you turn yourself into a Nazir. That's a mat piece. Okay? So this verse means that he should declare that the Vlad should be just like its mother for the same type of sacrifice. Because it cannot be bought simply on the strength of its mother. Its mother was meant to be a shlomim, so it's shlomim also. It is a Vlad after all. Because his own kedusha is pushed off. Why? His mother is a moon. It's a kedusha dechuya. So what you should do is dedicate him before he's born. Okay. Wow. You guys, well, like I said, we'll put on the chart after this. We're going to finish this halacha here. Kol psula mikdashim yipadu. So you have all these psula mikdashim when they're redeemed. Mutar l'shchototan b'shuk hatabachim. So they can be slaughtered at the shuk tabachim. What does it matter? Because for certain things, it says that's a little bit of a disgrace that these animals be treated just like any other meat, sent to the same slaughterhouse, processed at the same place. That's not right to do with sacrificial meat or meat that had been once sacrificial. But here it comes to teach us that no, psuli mikdashim, if they're redeemed, so you could slaughter them where the other animals are slaughtered, same slaughterhouse. And they could also be sold like regular meat. It's not a disgrace. And weigh out the meat. The litra means the same way they would measure the meat. They say to do this with certain types of meat is a bizayon, putting it on the scale just like any other. Literally, it's meat. It's like a meat market. Meat market is an expression taken from literally. It means a place where they sell meat. But something meat market is something that's demeaning. Okay. Okay, why did he mention this? Because Bechor and Meiser should not be treated this way. If for whatever reason Bechor and Meiser are not to be used for sacrificial purposes, can still bring them to the regular slaughterhouse and the regular place where they process the meat and sell it, by the pound like everything else. That's a disgrace to these two guys. Why we do this psulim mikdashin? Because it increases their value. Bechor and Meiser actually you lose out of some of the recuperative value. You can't recuperate all the money. All the value of the Bechor and Meiser because of this special honor that's given to them. But the Psulim Mikdashin, if they are to be sold like regular, so he'll get the complete value back. Mosif b'dmeim. Shar kachim should dmeim chozrim lehektish. The regular kachim, that money goes back to hektish. Sharei mevi b'dmeim be'emad acheret. And with that money, he could bring another animal as sacrifice. That's the whole point of the pidyon. So we sell them as we can. Remember, Kohen had to sell his truma, by the way. Selling truma reduces the value of the fruit. Why? Less demand. Less people can eat the truma. So truma sold on the market would just, it lowers the value. So too, but Bechor Meiser being sold, it has to be treated with better respect, so it lowers the value. But if you can sell these redeemed, blemished animals that have been for one time for sacrifice, selling them the right way helps you recoup all the money. Okay. Aval Bechor Meiser. The Bechor and Meiser that eventually they're blemished, so they can't be sacrificed. Shein demain lehektish. Their money doesn't go to hektish. When they are taken out to chulin, if they get blemished, it doesn't go to hektish. We will explain this later. They are eaten regularly if they develop a mum. We do not slaughter them at the regular market of the butchers. And we don't sell their meat there. Okay, well, we'll see these halachas afterwards. Last halacha. If a person says this bechor should be bedek habayis, okay, that also so this other animal also has become like a bechor. It should not be weighed on the scales. Litra means there's a way to measure it that way, and it should not be sold in shuk. He can't actually do this whole act of lahat peace, transfer the kedusha. El devar kanui lo kinyan gomer. Only something that's actually his. Okay, so he can't do that with the bechor. Why? Because the bechor isn't really his. Okay, interesting idea. Let's see the chart. So I'm going to put it on the screen now. Yeah, you sent it to me. I'm going to download it. I thought that these halachas are very interesting because many of us, like I said, with regards to the Tumantaro, if we have no practical experience keeping the halachas, So we're sort of stuck, right? We have to start learning these things. We have to keep it, and certainly the questions will come up the second we actually start doing it, right? So yeah, if these are things for which we are entirely unfamiliar, and it's good that we're familiarizing ourselves. Anybody ever have anything like this happen to them before? No. Download. Put the image up on the screen. Thank you, courtesy of Rabbi Makbili. He sent us these books, and he also gave us these charts. So, have you seen his YouTube videos? Okay, he puts up YouTube videos every now and then. Sorry. Okay. Here's the question: is the Vlad considered holy? I'm sharing my screen. Thank you. Here's the Vlad. Okay. This is basically time. Time is on the x-axis over here, and time's going this way because it's Hebrew, so it's right to left. And here we have a balas mum kavua and a balas mum over. So the mum kavua, here's its active hakdasha, and here's when it gets pregnant, and here's when it actually gives birth, and here's the different times you can redeem it. There's 3 different times. It can be redeemed before pregnancy, during pregnancy, or afterwards. Okay. So with a balas mum kavua, and it's redeemed before it gets pregnant, so the vlad will be chulin. Why? Because the mother's already redeemed. It didn't even become pregnant when it's holy. So of course the vlad is chulin. That's almost obvious. If the balas mum kavua is redeemed sometime before, after conception, but before giving birth, the vlad is still chulin because it's been redeemed. Balas mum kavua is supposed to be redeemed. The balas mum becomes completely chulin. So it's going to give birth now. Also, its offspring is completely chulin. But balas mum over, that's redeemed while it's still pregnant. It became pregnant while it's holy. So the vlad is chulin min Torah, but asur min rabbanan. Why? Because the vlad was conceived when its mother was holy. Its mother's been redeemed, yeah, and then the vlad comes out. It's going to be born, but problem is the pidyon happened while the thing is still holy. But it's still asur min. It's chulin min Torah. Okay, it's been redeemed, but asur min rabbanan. Next, if the pidyon happens after the animal has been after it's been redeemed, well, that's a problem. The redemption only happened after the mother was redeemed. So the mother gave birth while the mother was still holy. So vlad nifdeh l'chulin. So the vlad also should be redeemed because it was born the kedusha, so to speak. And if it's a balas mum over, and the mother managed to give birth before the mother was redeemed, the vlad is completely kosher. His mother himself wasn't completely a bal mum, and he himself was born while his mother was still technically holy. So now he is completely holy, and he should be brought as sacrifice. Unless you redeem him himself. Can you redeem it? We said no, it shouldn't be redeemed even. Okay? Shouldn't be redeemed. It's not right to redeem it. Next, the animal is holy or not. Here we have a bal mum kavua. So there's hakdasha and there's its death. There's the act when it's dedicated and then it actually dies. So it's a balas mum kavua. As long as it's still alive, balas mum vera, balas mum kavua, it's possible to redeem it. But if the animals die, balas mum kavua can still be redeemed in its dead state, and the balas mum over cannot be redeemed in its dead state. It's just be buried. Okay? And when do we say this? When could it be redeemed in its death state? When what? While it's still twitching. Okay. So I guess that's in those still 2 minutes early. I guess that's a good conclusion here. We'll stop it there. We pray. Who knows? Maybe this week. Maybe something will happen. I think that like I said, we're standing amazing times. If Korban Pesach is now a real issue. Like every year, the odds have become greater that we're going to do it. Like I said, you can't start with Korban Pesach. Let's start with the Korban Talmud first. Don't jump into it. If we just let every Tom, Dick, and Harry get involved in this, then they're not ready. At least Korban Talmud, there's a select individuals who really know what they're talking about, who have been preparing for this. So let's let them start, lead the way, and then we'll follow. But it's not like we're going to wait generations. We're going to, this year. We said it last year. L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim. Let's actually mean it this year. Okay. Have a good Shabbos. See you next time.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.